Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the series premiere of The Rook, as well as the latest episode of Nosferatu. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below, include a time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you don't want to hear what I had to say about the series premiere of The Rook, you can skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of Nosferatu. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is the series premiere of The Rook. A very great series premiere, very nice introduction to this story. Obviously, as you know, I'm not a reader, so this is my first time, getting the telling of this story because I've never read the book that this is based on. Nevertheless, getting into the main review, I do apologize. It is very interesting getting introduced to our hero, Mythony, which is a very unique name. I've never heard that before. I wonder, is that like a British thing, or is that just like a very unique name to this character? I don't know. I like the explanation too. Mythony, rhymes with Tiffany. Nevertheless, waking up surrounded by bodies, only having a letter to go by, and it's just like, it's very interesting. Like, obviously, my brain immediately kind of thinks, like, I'm sure, Memento is kind of similar, but I'm not that familiar with the movie. So, obviously, the point of reference I will probably make, it's comparing it to Blind Spot. Except her situation is a little more different. At least, in Jane's case, it's like bits and pieces of her memory could come back. It seems like Mythony's memories, once they're gone forever. And so there's that type of situation. What's interesting, too, is that she finds out that basically someone did this to her. Like, the fact is that someone warned her ahead of time to let her know, like, yo, this is going down. She never actually explains who actually let her know what was up, like how she knew that this was coming, just that she knew that she would survive it, but she just wouldn't have her memories anymore, which is interesting. Because it seemed like, especially with stuff that happens later on when she gets attacked in the bank and everything, it seems like the way they were like, oh, because we know what you are and how valuable you are. So I'm wondering, is there a bounty on her head, or hence why they were talking like that? Or is it because she has powers, and do they try and sell people for powers? Like, if I had to make any comparisons, like what the Kree were kind of doing in season 5 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Is it kind of that type of thing when it would come, like how they would kind of sell Inhumans? I'm curious, is it kind of that similar situation where it's like, oh, we're going to sell you, or are they just going to harvest their organs because maybe people with abilities, their organs are special or something? I don't know. Or like I said, maybe it's just straight up, someone wants you dead, we were hired to do it, so you're going to die. I don't know. But like getting back to what I was saying earlier too, it's like there's no chances of her getting her memory back, at least kind of like her past self said that. So that in itself is very interesting, because obviously all of this is about focusing on the right now. That means everything related to her childhood, if her previous self, like she made notes of like, oh yeah, you're definitely allergic to like bees, and dairy obviously doesn't sit well with you break out in hives and stuff like that. But it's like, those are like small things, a little bit about herself, but like, are there going to be other things sprinkled around? Out of anyone, Linda knows her the best, so Linda will probably be able to fill in some childhood stuff, because it's like, well, I've known you half your life, but it's like still, the small intimate details of who you were, your upbringing and stuff like that might be gone forever. And Mythony would probably like, no, this other stuff is more important, so all that, it's kind of its own, so I did like kind of like the Matrixy thing of like, okay, so here's the blue key, which will unlock a safety deposit that will basically let you, make a new ID. You can just live your life. Red key, you go back to your old life, learn everything about who we were, and, go back to that life, but it's very dangerous. And so obviously, it's like, okay, so like the blue key to kind of live a docile, normal life, while the red key is more so like a dive deeper down the rabbit hole, essentially. Like I said, obviously making kind of like the Matrix comparison. So what I thought was kind of fascinating is she actually, she was going to use both keys, because I guess she was going to weigh her options. But I guess like the way everything works out, because she ended up going for the red safety deposit first with the red key, then it's like, oh, like she didn't have time to get the blue at the same time. But she didn't throw away the blue key; she still has it. So that speaks volumes. So obviously, it's interesting, kind of breaking down the organization she works for, the Shike. Obviously, like I was wondering how like the Rook plays into this, and it's like, okay, so they're chess pieces and stuff like that. She's part of like a support support team. There's like the main Chikei, and then there's like the support group, which includes the Gestalt, which I look it up because I was slightly familiar with the term Gestalt just because of the game Nier, because obviously like the American, well, the one, I don't know if it's just in Europe. It might be probably Europe and America, like that version was known as, well, I think it's everywhere outside of Japan, because I think in Japan is the only place Nier is known as Nier Replicant. Obviously, there's differences. I know this isn't a video game place to be talking about video games, but it's kind of relevant. So I had to look it up because I was slightly familiar with the term Gestalt because of that, but I couldn't remember what it meant. And basically it means a whole that is perceived to be more than the sum of its parts is the definition I saw, which makes sense when it comes to the Gestalt, because it seems like there's 4 of them, and basically it almost seems like they make up one hive mind that's split amongst 4 people. But even Mythony was like, honestly, I still don't 100% know how their power works, but if like you're having a conversation with whatever information that is contained in that conversation is passed to the other 3. So they are more than the sum of their parts, essentially. So they kind of represent one person scattered in 4, but obviously with a little bit more to it. Obviously, that might not be all that they have, because obviously they able to kind of perceive other things too, because one of them was able to be like, oh yeah, all these injuries and stuff like that, they were internal without, not unless that one had already looked at and examined the bodies thoroughly. And so obviously but 2 of them were having the conversation at the same time. So it might have just been the thing of like, oh, one had examined the body, so the information bounced between all of them. Or like I said, maybe there's more to their powers. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see in that regard. We also dive into a little bit about Conrad. The fact is that he's having an affair with somebody's wife, to the point, like, because it seems like his power is to affect the atmosphere, so he can either knock you out or just kind of, I guess, like, you know, when you're deprived of air, you get a little loopy and stuff like that. So it's a situation of like, that's the perfect time to kind of get the truth out of someone. It's kind of what Mythony was saying. It could be used to, you know, get the truth out of you, or just straight up like, you know, knock you out. I'm wondering what are some other applications of his power. I'm also curious what Linda's is, because that was never brought up in conversation. She might not even have a power. She might just be the leader of the team, but regardless. What's also interesting, because it turns out the person he's having an affair with is a home secretary, who I guess is kind of like the higher authority that the Chikei answers to, you know? So that's interesting. So it's like your boss's boss you're kind of sleeping with, so that's interesting. Some other interesting things I should point out, like at first, I've recognized some faces, because obviously Olivia Munn, I've seen her in plenty of things, obviously like Attack of the Show, some of the movies she's popped up in, which there is a very, very long list of ones she's been in. But like I said, for me personally, like Attack of the Show was like the first thing I kind of got to know her from. So I was curious like what her position would be in this whole situation, because even from the trailer, it didn't piece together in my head of like, oh yeah, this is like the show is taken mainly in London, I guess? I don't know, somewhere in Europe. I don't know Europe's geography like that. So you can tell from the beginning that Monica, her character's name, had a very personal connection to this. Like the moment she shows up, she's like, oh yeah, I know the 6th body. It's like, okay, you know 1 out of 8 bodies. So it's like, okay, so it's got to be someone personal. It seems like it's someone from her agency, but also it seems like there was more, maybe like a fiance type of situation. Even if not that far, it was someone that she was intimate with. I'm curious if her power like some superhuman strength type of thing, because when she like punched a tank, it didn't seem like she hurt herself or anything. Put a big dent in. Because it might not just be the Chikei that has like people with abilities. There might be other groups from different organizations that have people with abilities too. Because obviously this is just focusing on like a liaison situation between the Americans and the Brits. So who knows beyond that, like what the other worlds look like. Maybe it's something she has that she doesn't let her agency know, or maybe she does. I don't know. It's interesting. I wasn't expecting Linda to come to Mythony, and it's like, oh wait, I know about everything that's going on. Well, not everything, but it's like, wait, you don't know who I am. Oh, you must have lost your memory. She obviously tried to figure out what was the extent of her memory loss. Once again, is that thing of like, she remembers details about stuff like this and everything, but everything related to who she is, everything that is her, memories connected like that, are all gone. So once again, scary just because there's no getting those back. And Linda's trying to be there for her and help her and everything. It's like, oh, I'm here. Like the fact of it is, I've known you all your life. I'm an ally. Even her past self being like, hey, the fact that you could trust her. She's like, she's the person that cares about you the most in this organization. And she's kind of like a mentor to you. So there's that. But obviously you can tell she was a little disappointed, but being like, oh, because Mythony was like, I'm sorry, I'm disappointed. She's like, no, it's not me you're disappointing. It's actually literally yourself, because she knows like what kind of person Mythony is, and the way that this current Mythony is acting isn't her Mythony, you know? So that's a little interesting. I thought it's almost kind of like sweet a little bit. Like obviously she looked through like the deleted files, and it's like, okay, so here she is, because she's a bit of kind of like things have to be in a certain order. Like she's a very organized person, so she wanted everything to kind of be very neat for the videos and stuff like that. So it's kind of cute to see like, oh yeah, here's her kind of like some Mythony outtakes. But it kind of actually gets a little sadder, especially when you get to a different video where she's like, basically it comes down to the fact is that, you know, someone did this to me. Like, why would someone do this to me? I don't know. And then she had to go, no, who and why doesn't matter, because if you're seeing this video, that means it's already happened. And she's breaking down, and she got rid of that because like with the first video she was looking at in that room, it's like, wait, it cuts like that. Some stuff was cut out, and that's what it was. It's, you know, because she wanted her to focus more so on all the stuff of like what was important, didn't want to get dragged into details. But at the same time, past Mythony is like, I'm going to forget everything, who I am. I'm essentially, and you actually think about it from like a grand scale of things, like Mythony died. It's like who she was is gone. She can most likely never be that person again. She can reclaim bits and pieces, but that would never 100% be hers anymore, you know? And that's super sad, and that's what makes that even, like I said, it was kind of like, oh, it's kind of cute and everything until it got to that point. It's like, oh, that's heartbreaking when you actually break that down and think of it like that, you know? And I think that's because initially she wasn't sure what she was going to do. It seemed like she was going to get the blue key until she saw that video of seeing like her past self being so distraught about it. It's like, I guess she feels like, no, I owe it to myself to find out who and why this happened to me, you know? And past me wanted those answers, and she deserved it, you know? Because she was going to walk away. But do note, she didn't get rid of the blue key, so I'm assuming that's going to trail back, that when everything's all said and done, she'll get a new identity and walk away from all of this. That's what it seems like, but we'll see if things will go the way she potentially wants them to. So there's also the interesting thing about apparently she slept with one of the Gestalts, which is interesting, which is weird, because I was like, one of them pulled her away, and I'm like, oh, so like, can you shut the whole thing off if you want to? Apparently not, because another one comes over and it's like, I'm glad we can handle this like mature adults. It's like, okay, so I'm assuming he's the one you specifically slept with, but the complicated thing about the powers, they all know. And it's so interesting too, because they made a note to be like, okay, I'm glad you're handling this like an adult, because you know, out of anyone, I wasn't sure how you would handle it, you know, when it comes to your emotions and stuff like that, which I'm assuming that's supposed to be a reference to how it's tied to her powers, which even that's still not clear about exactly how her powers work. I was wondering if it's supposed to be like some internal telekinesis, in the sense that like her telekinesis doesn't affect the outside but the inside. But then I was thinking like maybe her power is more like a vacuum, like maybe she like pops up like almost like a black hole inside of you that sucks you in, or just like maybe she controls the air in your body. I don't know. Whatever it is, it does internal damage, not necessarily external. I mean, to be fair, the dude that Monica cares about, like, that was a brutal situation. So that's why I'm wondering, is it kind of like something on the inside pops up and it just starts sucking from the inside? Or was that not even her? Was it actually, were those 8 bodies? I mean, I'd assume, like, because I'm curious, like, the dude, it wasn't his name Marcus, like, I'm assuming he was undercover with the group that ended up attacking her, and in self-defense, she ended up killing all of them, potentially. Once again, she doesn't remember exactly what went down, so that is the question, though. Like, was it a planned meeting? Was it an ambush, is what Linda was saying. Obviously, it was supposed to be an ambush of some sort, because Mythony knew ahead of time, but the question then becomes, like, was it like something she had set up? Was it something she knew someone was setting up for her? Whatever the case may be. So it's interesting too, because obviously Linda talks about the pills and stuff that Mythony is supposed to take. I'm wondering, is it supposed to be the fact is it's like, oh, because you need to be calm. I'm guessing like the more, not necessarily, I guess the more panicked and freaked out she is, the way her power, like maybe she can just naturally control her ability, but maybe taking a pill makes it a little less uncontrollable. Like, I'm curious, like, what the extent of, like, her control of her power is. Especially, like I said, because they made that remark. It seems like if she gets a little emotional, her powers might go. You know, because obviously in that moment in the bank, she was scared as her powers activated. I'm curious, is it something she does necessarily have to control with her hands? Or does that make it a little more simpler to activate? Does she actually need her hands to activate it? Or, does it make it a little easier to aim? Like, does it make it like widespread? Because remember, in the bank, she killed only one of them. The other one was alive long enough to press the button, eventually died anyway. But I guess it depends on the severity of how much power she used. Because one of them started bleeding from his head. So it's like he got the brunt of it, but the lady didn't, so. And then obviously the big part of this is at the very end finding out, like, a letter from herself being like, these are the people I trust. She cares about this job. She believes in what this job represents of kind of fighting the detestable aspects of this world. But it seems like Mythony believed that someone in the organization, this group, someone sitting in that room with her, betrayed her. Obviously that doesn't necessarily include Monica, but that doesn't mean Monica should be trusted, especially considering the fact that you potentially killed someone she cares about. So Monica potentially could be an enemy rather than an ally, but it's like, don't trust anyone, which I guess all those videos and stuff might have been recorded before she wrote that note that was in her desk. I mean, it seems like the only person she potentially can trust is Ingrid, but even then, I guess it's still kind of like a, maybe not, I don't know. It seems like Ingrid might be the only person she can necessarily trust, so that's definitely going to be interesting. Oh yes, a little side note, I should also point out, I kept looking at the actress who played Claudia. I was like, I recognize you. I was like, there's something in my head that was like, I know you from something, but I couldn't place it. I was like, you have a British accent, but I know whatever it is you were in, you didn't. I ended up looking it up. I'm a complete and utter idiot. She played Chow in Into the Badlands. I was like, what? And then I also didn't realize, because I'm also an idiot, I guess just because our hair is obviously a little different, she's also Yumiko in The Walking Dead. I felt like an idiot for not realizing that was the same actress, but also I was just like, of course, that's what I recognize you for. I'm like, dude, that's so crazy. So that was just something that was floating in the back of my mind. I was like, jeez. I felt like such an idiot for not realizing all that. I'm like, oh my god. But nevertheless. But I'm very much liking the show so far. I'm very interested to kind of dive deeper in this to see fully what the Shikei is up to. And obviously, like, Mythony trying to unravel this mystery of, like, who betrayed her? Why did they do this? Was it something she came across? Like, how much of past Mythony is going to be helpful? Like, who does she confide into? Because, like, it's like, oh, maybe I should trust Linda. Maybe I shouldn't. So that's going to be a whole complicated thing. Obviously, Linda's the only one who knows her memory's missing. So that could put Linda at the top of the suspect list. Because it's almost like, what would make you immediately jump to, like, wait, you don't know who I am? Maybe she confided in her previously. Maybe she'll say that Mythony confided in her previously. But then it's the whole thing of, like, it could play in her advantage and be like, oh man, you don't remember this and that. Like, she can actually take advantage of it. Oh, thank goodness she doesn't remember. Maybe she feels bad because it is someone that's important to her. And now it's like, oh, you're not dead. Luckily, it's just your memory's wiped. So we can go back to everything being good potentially. I don't know. So, but obviously everyone else, she's going to have to pretend like she's okay. And obviously there's a whole complicated thing, like I said, with the Gestalts, like their whole deal with her. So it's definitely going to be very interesting to see where all this ultimately takes us going forward into the next episode. And now moving on to this week's episode of Nosferatu. A lot of interesting things went down. Obviously, you have Vic kind of dealing with everything. She's not sleeping at all, because it's like knowing that, what Bing did, finding Sharon's body, knowing that Haley's out there. It's just all too much to the point she goes. I think it's a combination of just her not getting any sleep, but I think also being driven by the fact is that her head is just flooded with thoughts of the Wraith and Charlie, to the point she's like drawing all of that all over the place. Obviously Tiffany and her dad come across it, and it kind of freaks them out. And obviously, like, her dad tries to equate his situation in Kuwait to the point, like, he kind of experienced a similar situation to Vic. He was about her same age and everything, but she's like, it's different. It's not the same. But he's like, yeah, but the fact of the matter is I didn't talk about it. I kept it inside, and it ate at me like a poison. He doesn't want the same thing for her. You can see for a moment she almost wants to tell him everything, but she goes, I'm fine. Because the only person she can really rely in and tell everything to is Maggie, And it's kind of interesting because Maggie ends up bringing up something I brought up last episode and wondering why the bridge took Vic specifically to Bing and not Charlie. And it is kind of one of the thoughts I had It's kind of like, okay, so it's because it is moving. It can't take her to a moving object, hence the Wraith, so it took her to the last place it was before it went moving, and that was at Bing's place. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Because last time I was wondering if it was a situation of the bridge takes her where she needs to go, not necessarily 100% where she wants to go, but it always takes her where she wants to go. But in this particular case, it couldn't, so it took her to the next best thing, and that was Bing. Which I guess the argument could be like, it could have been beneficial because, Sharon was there at the same time. Sadly, next time she goes there, she's already gone, but still. You have a detective looking into this whole situation. Obviously, Vic can't say everything because Maggie had been like, yeah, you tell them about your bridge, they're just going to think you're crazy, they're not going to really listen to you. And, which that comes up later on, but I'll get to that soon enough. And that same detective interviews Bing, and it turns into this whole thing of like, okay, Bing, like, because now the detective, because there's there's holes in her story and stuff like that. It's like, oh, you went to Bing's place. Oh, he talked about making her clean. And it's like, I guess maybe she's thinking like, oh, they were lovers and then he committed this crime and then she didn't want to admit that they were lovers or something. I guess that's a detective's way. Like, because that's the thing. When you got all these holes in it, you start filling them in yourself, trying to make the most sense out of it. Sadly, this is a situation you're not going to logic your way out of it. Like, there is no logic to the craziness that is the situation Vic has found herself in. Bing has his answers, but the only reason why he has those answers is because Charlie convinced him to. I love that Charlie goes and he's like, oh, you want to take a seat? And Charlie looks around and he's like, I think I'll stand. It's like he probably knows that Bing, does his thing everywhere. It's interesting too because obviously, like, Bing is listening to Vic and be like, oh, what she said, what I did to Sharon was bad. And it's like, yeah, but I mean, I guess because in his mind, it's not. Maybe he was convinced what he did wasn't bad because obviously what he did to her, we know he did to his mom too. But I guess in his twisted mind, it's kind of like, oh, that he loved his mom and she rejected him when he loved her, and even though that wasn't love, and but I guess maybe he was locked up in medical facility to kind of deal with that, so maybe he went through therapy or something, and it's like, oh, he seems well adjusted now, so maybe people just let him go. But obviously, like, the fact is that it seems like a very similar thing that he did to Sharon that he did to his mom, which the detective doesn't know about because she brings up his files, but his files are closed. If she gets his files opened, then she'll be like, whoa, the exact similarities between Sharon's death and his mom's death would, probably put in her mind of like, oh, Bing might actually be behind all this. I think that might be what ends up, pushing that along next episode, but we'll see. So there's all of that. But even then, you could tell the detective was already suspicious of Bing. She just doesn't have any evidence to act upon. Once again, it's a crazy situation where you need evidence to prove anything. And so I'm curious, will Joe come into the picture? Because, Maggie gets hurt at the end of the episode, like, as I'm skipping around, so I do apologize. But I get the feeling like he'll probably come to town and be like, yeah, Maggie's believing that this Wraith has something to do with the kidnappings. And then it's like, whoa, Maggie's story from Joe will probably get to the detective, and she'll be like, okay, so maybe, just maybe, she isn't all crazy. Vic is, that might be that explanation. But along with all of that, you also have the whole situation of the complicated relationship she has with her dad right now. Because for her, it's like her dad kind of looks at her like he's a little scared of her, which obviously hits Vic in a certain place. Because for her, it's like her dad has always been her champion. No matter how other people looked at her, whether she was weird or not, she always felt like her dad accepted her and loved her, made her feel like she belongs. But now it's like, because now it feels like, oh, you're choosing Tiffany over me. I'm your daughter. She's just some woman you're with. I'm your flesh and blood. But it seems like that doesn't matter anymore because it's almost like Vic is there destroying what he's trying to build. And obviously it just leaves her in this complicated situation because it's like there she is with her dad, but she can't go back home to her mom because her mom is like telling her to lose the bike and everything, which the fact is Maggie brought it up. The fact is of like, yeah, we can't let him know what your what your bike is, that your bike is your knife, because if something happens to it, because he could destroy your bike and that you lose access to your bridge or something will happen to it. I'm assuming because, let's not forget, Vic's mom wants to get rid of her bike. I'm thinking when it's all said and done, like while Vic's, locked away for a couple days, her mom is going to get rid of her bike and she's not going to have access to her bridge and she's not going to be able to help with this situation. That's what I'm assuming. Like the fact is that, like Maggie brought up that point of if something happens to her bike, she can't access her bridge. So we'll see, but I think that's the direction that potentially might head. just because, she thinks, oh, Vic isn't careful. She's on that death machine. She's off getting high with Craig. That's why she was able to stumble across the body. And it's just like, once again, it's like her mom thinks she knows everything. She loves her mom. She loves her dad. But it's just a complicated thing of like, they don't know what's going on. They don't understand. She can't confide in them. And obviously that's bubbling to the surface. She goes to Willa's party, bringing Maggie along. It ends up drinking and talking to Drew. Even in confiding in him about like the fact is, well, for one, an incident when she was younger, her cousin's dipping her in the water and she almost drowned, like caught between life and death, reality and thought, and ends up bringing the whole thing of like how her being a strong creative and all of that, people who can bring their thoughts into reality and stuff like that. And she's like, I'm one of those people. And she asks Drew, does he believe her? And he's like, yeah. He brings up the whole like multiverse theory too, of like there being like alternate dimensions that are very similar. Like basically it's like, oh, there's thousands of me and there's thousands of you. Like our dreams that we have like are kind of past in some cases because we already did them, but then in other cases we're living them right now. So he has an open mind. Whether that was him just being kind of like this artist having like that very like brainy perspective, or whether he outright truly believes her, it's hard to say. The only other person she really has in town, like she says she feels like she doesn't belong, but the only person who accepts her and knows everything about her is Craig. For him, he even admits like the only reason why he took the class they're in, like that art class or whatever they're in, it's like, oh, the only reason why I'm in this is just so I could be close to you. You're like the only good thing about this town. And so it seems like he's even basically saying, like, I like you, but it seems like maybe she just doesn't know how to really feel about that. Maybe it's that thing of, like, I kind of know that you like me, but I don't want to destroy our friendship, so I'm not willing to say anything, maybe. I don't know. Because for her, she's got to get out of this town. She's got to get away from just everything. Once again, it's too much. It was kind of interesting seeing worlds kind of collide a little bit in Vic's life because like her other crazy side of things, including Maggie, meeting kind of her more normal life with Willa, and this whole conversation of Willa being like, oh yeah, parents suck. I talk about Vic's parents and being like, oh, I'm glad she's able to kind of live it up and have fun. And she talks about her parents, and Maggie's like, oh, boo-hoo, you, essentially being like, oh, this great life that you have, your parents that actually are in your life, they take care of you, they leave you this big house and everything. But yeah, they can make sure you get an education. Yeah, oh, boo-hoo, you, oh, woe is me. But it's like, oh, what about your parents? Do you love your parents? And Maggie's like, I'm an orphan. And it's like, oh, when did your parents die? She's like, my parents aren't dead. They just turned their back on me because I'm unholy. They disowned her. And at the moment she says, like, because of the Scrabble thing. And she shows off to Willa, like, the Scrabble thing. I love the lights flickering and stuff. And she's like, oh, here's Beans. Because she had asked, well, who do you think is the most popular girl at the school or whatever? And then Willa's like, well, Beans. That's what my mom called me when I was a baby. It's like, how do you know Vic? It's like, I'm her driver. And I'm like, I love that, being all mysterious and stuff, even taking care of Vic. It's kind of interesting, their perspectives and everything, because like I said, I brought up Vic's situation with her dad earlier, but in Maggie's case, is the fact is that her mom, like the first thing her mom did when she saw her Scrabble thing was like, oh, let's take her to a pastor because it looks unholy. I guess her parents are very religious, and so they looked at her as if she was something bad. And now Vic is kind of feeling like her dad is kind of looking at her like that, like almost treating her like almost like she's a nuisance on the life that it's like, oh, like she's 18, she's old enough, she'll be responsible. I don't have to worry about her too much. It's like, that's my kid, and this is the new life I'm trying to. But let's not forget, he left. He went to his new life, he went to his new girl, and then he just left you behind. Like, no matter what the circumstances may be, he did leave you. But now Vic has to deal with that. Even at the end, it's like, he's like, oh yeah, it's like, oh, this would be good for you, get some sleep and stuff like that. And she's like, is it good for me or is this good for you? And Tiffany, and he was like, it's good for everyone. And it's just like, not realizing how messed up things are. I get it from an outside perspective looking in. It's like, okay, you're a parent, you're worried about your kid, but at the same time, it doesn't. It seems like you're more concerned about the effects it's having on your life rather than being concerned about hers. And which is an easy statement to say, like, because obviously it's like, I'm not in his shoes. I don't see things the same way he does. Maybe her mom might even see things this way and be like, this is the best choice. We'll see. But Vic went to go confront Charlie on her own, which Maggie was like, no, don't. The fact of the matter is, we're in this together because, like, it's like, the outside world kind of treats them as like they're different and they're freaks. But the fact of the matter is, your bridge brought you to me. So maybe people like us are supposed to stick together because they're the only ones that can confide everything into each other. And the fact is that, it's not like that. I'm like, oh, like her and, Maggie and Vic are becoming good friends already. And I'm just like, oh, I hope, like, there's part of my brain that's like, well, when it's all said and done, I hope you guys stay like besties when it's all said and done. I'd love that. But nevertheless, Vic goes and confronts Charlie. Now, it's very, very interesting, a lot of the stuff they bring up. For one, he's like, your inscape is a manifestation of your mind, and the fact is you might want to be careful about all those bats flying out because, well, you know where this metaphor is going. So I'm assuming it's supposed to be like, the bats are supposed to be her sanity is kind of what that's supposed to be. So like the more those bats leave, the more of her sanity that's slipping away until she kind of dry. I guess that's also why, you know, because obviously the effects of using her inscape so much is to the point she was like becoming obsessive, like she was kind of drowning in her own mind. And I guess that's it. She's going a little insane because of that. Not unless he was referring to the fact that it's supposed to just be like, I mean, like the fact is he says a representation of your mind makes me think just going crazy, that your sanity slipping away. I guess I wonder, does it manifest itself in different people in different forms? Like hers is bats, but maybe it looks like that differently for Charlie. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's because each inscape affects everyone differently. And it's kind of interesting because Charlie's like, most strong creatives don't have their abilities long enough before they cripple them for them to reach their full potential. So I guess like in the case of Jolene, it seemed, I was under the impression he did that to her, but maybe it's a combination. Well, it seems like that was more so like Jolene's situation, but nevertheless, like obviously Vic's bridge is taking its toll on her head and obviously her body, like her eye situation. It's like, especially at the beginning when they close up on it, it's like, it makes you kind of want to close your eye because you're like, you feel like it's almost happening to your eye. And that's just how I am. I like eye stuff and like whether it's like someone getting stabbed in the eye or like blood from my, it just always, eye stuff just always like the most, it's one of those things that kind of gets you a little, you can't like help but like flinch a little bit. That's one of my things. Nevertheless, he ends up bringing the fact is that obviously like his inscape takes its toll on him, but for him it's like, I don't have to worry about that because he's found a way to counteract that. Obviously, I'm talking, like I've brought up before, the whole kid situation. So he's able to live forever because that's what his, you know, I guess his inscape takes from him, his youth, his life. I guess potentially that's the price it pays for his. Well, because once again, we don't know what the price is for everyone. Like I said, Maggie's it's the whole stutter. For Vic, it's the headaches and the toll it's taking on her body. I guess for him, it's his age potentially. He gets old, but he's able to live forever. But at the very, or maybe it just rapidly ages him. Either way, it keeps him around. Like I said, it seems like the recent development of him getting younger is a byproduct of it. It seems like, whoa, I guess he found like, he's like, oh, this is interesting. So it seems like he found a switch where it's like, okay, so I can not only, you know, halt the effects of my inscape has on me, I can also reverse them too. And for him, it's like, oh, I'm saving on these children, but it seems like he has ulterior motives. I wonder, is it just by turning them into vampires and keeping them young forever, he's feeding on the potential youth that they would have had, the potential life they would have had as kids before, and potentially turning them into vampires, or like what that exactly entails. Once again, we still don't know the full scope of everything. This is just me piecing together from what's been presented so far. We haven't really, like, once again, we still haven't even seen him directly turn them. It's like they just wake up and they like their teeth start falling out. So it's like, did he bite them? Does his inscape kind of work like that, where it's like once he kind of wears a child's minds down to like, oh, go with me, believe in me, and I'll take you Christmas and you'll be happy and everything. That's when, is it more of a his inscape does that to them, or does he do that to him? Like, I'm curious, you know, because we haven't seen him with the teeth. Like, it seems like he has regular teeth, right? Or no, we did see his teeth at being one point being sharp, right? I don't remember. Either way, because we definitely see his nails and whatnot. So it's interesting too, because Vic had commented on it. It's like, you're younger than I thought you were, because everything she saw in her head was always of him as, oh, that's what he really looks like. So, but obviously, like, he's trying to correlate with Vic in a sense of like, oh, we're both the same, we're kind of alone, like, because Vic was like, oh, you don't belong anywhere, and he's like, I feel like you feel the same way, because it's like people like us strong creatives, we can't be in the same world as basically as these regular folk, because like you look at one person to another person at like the bus stop or whatever, it's like you can't really tell much difference between them, but us, we stand out in the crowd, so we shouldn't be kind of amongst the common folk essentially. So what's also interesting too is that his bike works, the Wraith works interestingly enough to the point like all you have to do is touch it and it knows all there is to know about you, because the moment Maggie touched it, he knew exactly who she was. It's like, wait, who's Margaret Lee? And it's like, huh. So I guess in that moment, like, I guess if you're in close enough proximity, it learns everything it needs to know, but he has to be nearby to kind of know all there is to know about you. I guess it's a combination of like they both can do it. Like if he's near you, close enough proximity, he can do it. But like I guess all you have to do is touch the car, and the car will transmit everything to him. Like they have a telekinetic link like that, because his bike kind of works on its own. Which once again, I'm curious, is that something Vic could eventually do with her bike? Either way. Sadly, Maggie ends up getting run down by the car, and obviously the whole detective situation, like I brought up earlier. Vic is telling him the truth and everything, but it's like, telling her the truth and everything, but she doesn't believe, and it's like, now she's gonna be locked up to see like, oh, what's wrong? It's like just when she couldn't keep it in, just because she didn't have anyone to confide into, because Maggie's unconscious right now. So it's like, what do I do? She tries to tell the detective the truth, but she. Like, no matter what she did, she was kind of screwed, because the detective was already looking like, oh, are you being in a relationship? Or are you at the bus stop because you were trying to run away? And it's like, oh my God. But she did give her enough information that maybe next episode, something, like I said, maybe Joe popping up, being like, okay, maybe there's something there. And she decides to look into it and find out that there is truth to what Vic said, and maybe think like, okay, yeah, you might be a little crazy here and there, but some of the stuff you brought up, there might be truth to it, because just because you're crazy doesn't mean you're not right, which in this case, we know people look at Vic as if she is crazy, but we as the audience, and she and Maggie know that she's right, so I'm curious, like, is it going to be a situation of Craig coming to help her? Does Drew come to visit her? Willa, her mom, like what that's all going to entail? I'm very interested to see where all this ultimately takes us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.